Hey, everybody, and welcome to Career Expert Roundtable. I am Bill, the company's expert, and with me, as always, is Abby from the YouTube channel Life Work Balance. How you doing today, Abby?
I am doing well, Bill. How about you?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. It's sunny where I am. We just had daylight savings time, so
Us
it's
too.
sunnier than all hell.
Yep.
Yeah, but this is the live stream where we answer your questions. So if you are watching this live on my channel, or you're also watching it live on Abby's channel, and I believe Abby's
Mhm.
Twitch channel,
Yep.
wherever you are, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity of the video feed. Get in the chat box. Let us know if you have any questions, anything to do with hiring, jobs, careers, networking, interviews, resumes, all that kind of stuff. That's what we're here to talk about. Abby is a recruiter. I am a former hiring manager. So between the two of us, we have some knowledge and some experience to help people out with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's nice. Our experience kind of covers the big scope of what job search is from a, you know, very early application materials development process all the way to the hiring manager and hiring stage of the job search process. And we were talking earlier about, if there's anything kind of new with the job market, what people can expect. And Bill and I were discussing that not much really changes from the conversations that we tend to have with the people that we're working with.
Yeah.
It's hard. That's probably the easiest way to put it. Is searching for a new job is not super easy. It's not something that people are looking forward to doing in most cases. And it requires you to be pretty intentional, strategic. You can't just wing it and expect things to, I guess, come to fruition pretty quickly. So it can take weeks, it can take months. And then there are even some people out there who are experiencing years of searching for a job. They might be able to make it here and there with some, odd jobs that they pick up, Amazon delivery drivers, Uber, those sorts of things. But finding an actual job a job that's a little bit more stable and predictable can be difficult.
Yeah. And we just had, I think you're mentioning, we just had it's just the American numbers, I believe. I haven't heard anything about where I am in Canada about the Canadian numbers. I'm not really tuned into that stuff. But, but it was, people were expecting it to be better than what it actually turned out to be, as I understand it.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. They were expecting that maybe unemployment would decrease or more jobs would become available and the hiring market would be a little bit quicker for people. And it's not the case for that. They're not really quite sure what might be going on. It could be the current political climate, things just going on worldwide. So it just means it's still not easy. And so
yeah.
if you're getting into it, you've got to be pretty strategic about how you're going to stand out in this continuously competitive job market, which just happens to be the title of Bill's stream today.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right.
how to stand out in a competitive job market. So I think really step number one is to prepare yourself for the process that the job search will be. If you can set your expectations and understand that it will take some intentionality and some strategic planning on your part and time, then you're setting yourself up to be a little bit more successful with your mindset because you're not going to be expecting an instant new job right away. So
Yeah.
that
It's like,
mindset is really critical.
I mean, it's interesting. This is the question. Like, you think about it strategically. It's like, um, when we talk about the different methods to get a job, if you're doing the post-to job market where you're competing with many people, and what they try and do is they try and have it like be a level playing field, and they try and compare apples to apples, so they put everyone as close as possible in the same situation, so then they can measure the differences between them. And I would say that it seems like it's in order to stand out in that game, you have to do certain things, but it's completely different if you're not playing that game. If you're doing networking and stuff like that, uh, the way to stand out is often like you're the only one that showed up, for it. So it's not like you're going head to head with many other people, and
Yeah.
you're being put into this almost like artificial kind of testing, the way they measure everybody in a standard way.
Yes.
It's more organic. It's more like, a lot of people don't realize that they could do this or they should do this, but you're the one that goes for it and does it. And so you get the reward. And that might mean that you're not the most qualified person in the world for the job, but you're the one that displayed the most passion or the most initiative. And
Yep.
that's what got you in there,
Yep.
you know?
Well, I think this is kind of a side tangent that just popped into my mind that I think is relevant for people. When we're doing a job search, many times the person who's applying to jobs and is fully qualified is feeling frustrated because they keep getting ignored or glossed over, or other people are getting hired in their position. I think one of the most important qualities when it comes to the interview process and then also being an employee is being teachable and being like friendly, like being able to build relationships and rapport with other people. I might be the most qualified person with the most education and the most experience, but if I am difficult to like, people are not going to be gravitating toward me. They're going to be gravitating towards someone who is going to fit in with the rest of their team, who's going to be a contributor, who's going to be willing to, maybe take on some roles and responsibilities that are outside their initial scope of their position. So they're going to be looking for someone who is not only friendly and can get along with the group, but is also willing to try new things and take new things on and challenge themselves. And sometimes people who are the best at what they do are a little bit too rigid. So having that
Yeah.
flexibility is really important.
Yeah. It's interesting because, this has been talked about a lot, but it's very important. So it warrants talking about it some more. It's like, people talk about, say, job interviews, for example, and you go down, you do a job interview with maybe a hiring manager, maybe a recruiter, and everybody wonders, like, well, how do I pass the job interview? What's going on here? And it's kind of unintuitive to a lot of people that, like, the job interview is really primarily a test of your soft skills.
Yeah.
Like, there's a couple of things that are going on. One of them is, like, people are looking for risk factors, but it's, I would say, like, I don't know what you would say, Abby. You can tell me. I would say the number one most important thing would be a test of a person's soft skills.
Yep.
Is that how you see it? Like, or is it mainly like looking for risk or something else?
I would say it's a test of their soft skills. I think, when as a recruiter and working in human resources, when I think about the hiring process, the very first step of the hiring process, which is reviewing applications, is where I'm deciding if someone actually has the skills to do the job. If they meet those minimum qualifications and the minimum requirements for a position, then I'm going to want to interview them, and I'm going to want to confirm that they have those minimum qualifications, usually in like a phone screening or like the very first interview. But the focus of it is going to be those behavior-based interview questions, which are going to get at the soft skills of the person. So behavior-based interview questions are indicators. The way you respond to them indicate your past behavior, which then leads to assumptions about your future behavior. So people, when they're in the interview process, while they might be expecting very technical questions, and yes, there might be a very technical interview, usually the first stage of the hiring process is getting to know someone's soft skills, understanding why they do what they do, how they think, how they interact with other people, how they problem solve, how they communicate, and understanding if that's going to be a good fit for the role. And then the further steps in the hiring process might be a more technical interview, maybe an aptitude test when it comes to their abilities to do a certain job. They might be given like a homework presentation or a homework assignment, essentially, where they have to maybe create a presentation.
Yeah, those are the fun interviews. Yeah.
Yes, they have to create a presentation, or they have to complete a task to like show how they might code a specific program or solve a problem or manage a project, something that's a little bit more job specific. But initially, in most cases with the interview process, when you start talking to another person, they're really evaluating that behavior-based side of things, which is all those soft skills. And those are hard to learn.
Yeah, it's it's interesting because when you think about it, like, why would they go to all the trouble and inconvenience of bringing somebody down for an actual interview. I know we can do like Zoom interviews and stuff like so it's a little bit less inconvenient,
Yeah.
but it still is a big hassle to do. You have to do these things in real time. You have to spend like for example, if it's not just the candidate in the interview, there's the recruiter, there could be a hiring manager, there could be other people involved. All those people have to like devote their time.
Yeah.
So you're multiplying the hours required to do, and if you're going through multiple candidates, which you are, I mean, I think the average is what, around 6. Like, when is it more than that now when you do video interviews?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, more like, is it up to 10? Maybe not quite 10.
Yep. 10 would be what I would max.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
10 or less.
So like, okay, so if you've got like a recruiter, a hiring manager, and possibly one other person sitting in these interviews, so that's like 3 hours for the 3 employees, three person hours, man hours, whatever you call it,
Yeah.
for the people for every interview you do. So it's like you're talking like 30 hours plus just for the interviews, just for one round of interviews, and then you might have like a 2 rounds of interviews or something, and like that's extremely inconvenient. These are like highly paid people if you have managers and stuff in the interviews,
Yep.
and it's also taking them away from doing their actual job.
Mhm.
So it's not cheap, and it's not convenient, it's not easy to do. So the question is, well, why do this? Like, why can't you just send someone a questionnaire, like, or fill in this form or something, and then you don't need any of this, right? It's because they want to see who you are as a person. They want to see, like, what's it like interacting with you. Are you personable? Are you polite? Are you professional? This stuff is so important that they're willing to spend this kind of money. Like, if you multiply how much money these people make by 30 hours for just like one round of interviews, and that's just that one round. That's not discussing the candidates after. That's not writing job descriptions. That's not, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the back end, and it's just so that you can see what a candidate is like to deal with in person.
Well, and let's think about why that's so important. If you think, let's just talk like thinking pre-COVID, when everyone was going into the office for the most part.
Yeah.
You as a worker, as an employee, would spend more time with the people at work than you would your own friends and family outside of work.
Yeah.
At minimum, if you're a full-time employee, you're spending 40 hours in the workplace plus the commute time to and from work. So you're spending more time with these people in the workplace than you are with your own friends and family. So you should like them.
And that's a bonus for some people too.
Yes. You should be able to get along with them. You should be able to have difficult conversations with them. You should be able to overcome problems and challenges with them. So if you have a new person come in who throws a wrench into something that's been working really well, that throws a lot of things off. That increases turnover, likely for the rest of the team. It decreases productivity. So the hiring team has a big responsibility of picking the right person for the job. Not just the person who can do the job, but the person who can do the job and fit in with the team and the organization. And this is why the interview process and the hiring process is so difficult, is because it's not black and white. It's not, you can do the job, yes or no. It's, can you do the job, yes or no? And can you do the people side of things? And people side of things is where it gets really tricky.
Yeah. I mean, for like, we got 18 people here. It's like, for you guys watching this, I mean, have you ever worked in a place where they hired somebody, and then that person that comes in, that new person that comes in, they succeed in driving away a lot of the talented people that are there, ruining the way the whole place works? I mean, speak up in the chat if you've seen that happen. That's not unheard of. You know what I mean? That's why it's very important to know what someone's like. I mean, the fact that they're qualified to do their job. I mean, okay, but you could be qualified to do your job, but you could be anathema to like a work group. You could, sometimes even there's some political stuff going on. The fact that they even hired a certain person is enough to drive people away, or for the boss to lose all credibility with their team. It's like, I've been here for 10 years and you just hired this person that's absolutely green to be at the same level as me. Like, I resent that. I'm going to leave, on principle because I feel insulted and disrespected and you don't value what I bring and blah, blah, like stuff like this. There's a lot of stuff like that. So understanding what a person is like is huge.
Yeah.
And that's, you bring the recruiter's perspective to this, Abby. So you tell me, as a recruiter, what someone is like, I'd say that's the number one tiebreaker choosing among many qualified candidates.
Yep.
That's the thing that does it,
Yep.
What would you say to that?
I would agree with that. And I think that what is hard about being a recruiter is that there are all these people who are very qualified to do a position or to do a role or a task, whatever it might be. And the recruiter then has to make some decisions about who they're going to call for an interview. And that then is based off of some pretty subjective information provided by the candidates, which is why you have to be able to make yourself stand out in this really competitive job market as to why you're the best fit for not only the tasks that you'll be responsible for, but also for the team and doing some research and stuff ahead of it. So I'm going to, maybe sidetrack from where you were going initially, but when it comes to the application materials you put together, the quality and level of effort that is obvious to the recruiter is going to stand out to them as someone who really wants to work here with this team, with this job, who's not only qualified, but has maybe some of these extra qualities. And so I, as a recruiter, will be paying attention to people's applications. And if they're putting in a lot of effort, seemingly, with their resume, with their cover letter, if they include a portfolio, if they include a video, if they do something that makes them stand out among the crowd of all the other qualified people, the chances of me giving their application a little bit more of a review and then calling them for a phone screening or scheduling them for a first round interview is likely higher than the person who's just doing the bare minimum to stand out among all the other people. Because these days, with remote work being an option, suddenly you are now increasing the candidate pool from the people who are just local to the organization to people who are maybe on the other side of the globe and have the exact same qualifications as someone who is maybe local, but could be a much better fit if they're willing to, come in and not necessarily come in, but be available during the same working hours and all of that. So it's really interesting how the psychology of it all is somewhat shifting because we now have, our small candidate pool has been expanded to be so large. There's a lot more things that the recruiter is considering as to who might be the best fit for the position beyond those minimum qualifications.
Yeah, makes sense. That's a good point. We have a few questions here. Let's go over to some of these. Let's see.
Tully Mars. Congrats.
Bill, I nailed my third interview with some of your guys headed next week to meet the team and hear about the next episode. Well, congratulations, Tully Mars. That's excellent news, and I hope that things work out in your favor. So congratulations, and thank you for coming back and letting us know. LK says, is it common for recruiters to find a fit after initial screening, but then hiring manager after reviewing the notes decided not to proceed to the next stage with that candidate? Is it common? I think it happens. I don't know how common it is. I don't think it would be uncommon. What do you think, Abby?
No, I don't think it would be uncommon. I also don't think it's happening all of the time. And so I think the thing that's sticking out to me about this comment is reviewing just the recruiter's notes and then choosing not to proceed, not actually interviewing the other person. As a recruiter, I have found several people who I think could be a great fit for the role. And I think all three of them, for example, would be a great fit. And then I leave it up to the hiring manager to make that choice of who they decide to put in the position, because the hiring manager is likely going to be working with them on a regular basis. Whereas I am more, as a recruiter, facilitating the identification of potential employees for that hiring manager. So it is common, especially if you're talking about that initial screen process. At the initial screening, I'm narrowing down a pool of a ton of candidates to that top 10 max, maybe even less. And so then as a recruiter, I might be responsible for conducting a phone screen and calling people and talking to them, or having a Zoom meeting that's 10 to 15 minutes to identify if I think that they would be a good fit for this. And then I'm going to narrow it down further. especially if the next stage is going to a hiring manager or someone who doesn't have a lot of free time to make that decision. But it usually will be like a top 3 type of option where I send those to a hiring manager, and then they do some interviews, they review applications and application materials, and then they choose who maybe goes on to the next steps from there. So yes, after the initial screening, it would
I've never seen a recruiter pare it down more than 3. Like it's never gone. I've never seen this person or that person make a decision. Like it's the hiring manager is deciding between at least 3 candidates. They're going to make the final call.
Yep.
That's just what I've seen. I don't. I mean, maybe that there's other exceptions to that, but that's the only thing I've ever seen in any circumstance.
And if there's a recruiter involved, the recruiter likely is not going to be on that team. The only time that might be the case is if the recruiter is working in HR and is hiring for another recruiter, that they might be, working with someone else who's on their team. But in most cases, if a recruiter is being utilized, they are like an outside party who's kind of providing that more objective review of the initial set of applications to then provide options to the hiring manager and their interview team. And so it's not going to be, in most cases, up to the recruiter as to who gets hired. They are going to provide options to the person who's going to make that final decision.
Who checks references? Like I've seen both. I've seen recruiters check references for early stage, and I've seen, like the hiring manager check references, obviously for the later stage. But that's the common way it works across the board? Like both people can do it depending on what?
Yeah, I would say that there's not really a limitation. The organizations that I've worked with have actually used anonymous surveys that go out to potential references. So we use the survey platform that we would then send to the candidates that we wanted references from. The candidates would then put in reference contact information, and then the references would get an email with a survey. And that survey was then tailored specifically to the type of job that the person was going to be hired for. And then it would compile and kind of create a singular report for that specific candidate that included all of their references information. And it was a minimum of 5 references. Of those 5, I think 2 at minimum had to be previous managers, and then 2 or 3, something like that. And so then it would compile everyone's reference information, give like kind of an overall summary, a score, because there was, some scored options in that survey that they would take. And then you could also have their open-ended comments and responses. The other thing it tracked was like IP addresses. And so there were a couple of times where we could tell that a candidate was actually completing the reference.
Oh, yeah, they were gaming it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then they were immediately disqualified and no longer.
Yeah.
Even if you're working at the same location, you have multiple people completing the reference from the same like work environment. Maybe it's my direct supervisor and someone that I work with. There should be some inconsistencies with the responses that would indicate that the candidate is not completing it for themselves.
Yeah.
So long story short, references still happen. And it could be a recruiter calling those references and talking to them. It could be the hiring manager calling them, or it could be completely hands-off, more like a survey system.
Yeah, makes sense. I have a response to that, but let's get to some of these questions here. So Susan says, what are your thoughts on older job applicants' soft skills? Luckily, I've had really great success with interviews. Now that I'm older, do you think age will be a negative?
That's a super common question.
Yeah.
I think. And I don't, it depends on the organization. And so you can't say, yes, your age will be a negative, or no, your age will not be a negative. I think the thing that most older applicants have to consider is how younger people in the interview process might be biased against that age, and what they can do, what the candidate can do proactively to address some of those concerns and biases without being too obvious about it. And so the first thing that comes to mind for me is really highlighting how flexible and adaptable and how open to change and how you're excited to learn new things, how you might also bring this, sense of experience to be able to mentor and help other people learn these things. Like there's lots of ways to frame it. I want to warn anyone who is on the older end who is concerned about this, because if you start to approach things with this thought that they're going to be biased about your age, then that might then lead just to confirmation bias. You might behave in a way, you might say things in a certain way that then lead them to feel more nervous about your age than if you were to have a different attitude about it.
See, I mean, in all honesty, this is an area where I don't know. I feel like I'm just I'm out of touch with what's driving at least comments like this, because in all honesty, I've seen ageism but go in the opposite direction
Mm-hmm.
to what, like, where people want, they pick older people by
Mm-hmm.
default,
Mm-hmm.
because the assumption is like, oh, you must know what you're doing, you're old,
Yep.
you've done this for 35 years, how could you not know, how to do this right? Whereas someone who's like 25 years old, they've been doing it for 2 years, the assumption is, oh, you must clearly not know what you're doing because you're young, you're new, how could you know how to handle every possible thing, and it's like, I mean, the problem is that these are all assumptions based on stereotypes. You know what I mean? Like they're just bad, period, whichever way it goes,
Yep.
For management type stuff, you tend to not want to pick a 25-year-old. You know what I mean?
Someone who
Uh,
has no life experience,
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean,
limited.
so it goes the opposite way,
Mm-hmm.
that I think most people are asking this question for. They feel like you're going to be biased, inclined to hire the young person. Older people are feeling like, people are going to pass me over. Now, the one thing I can kind of see the logic in that is, and I know this is a bigger deal in the United States than it is in Canada, is like, medical benefits and insurance. Because the
Yeah.
idea is like, especially if you're like a blue collar type worker and you're like 60 years old, the assumption is that, oh, if you've had a lifetime of working in an unergonomic, environment or something,
Yeah.
you're going to develop all kinds of injuries that we're going to be left holding the bag if we employ you now. You're going to work here for 3 months, you're going to go off on disability, and then it's going to be our problem to cover your costs or your whatever, your medical, or so that's like a legitimate thing I can see possibly companies shying away from.
Yeah. Well, and I think,
You know,
the other thought of why people might shy away from that is, if you're an older individual, you might want to get a job just to ride out the final years before retirement, and that they might be looking for someone who's going to be there a little bit more long term. But
yeah.
I think that that's also kind of a false narrative. That's more false now than it was before,
Well,
because
that's that cliche you were talking about before, where the assumption is, oh, you're old, so you won't want to learn new things.
yep, yep,
You just want to use the knowledge you have. You're going to be completely uninterested in any kind of training or any kind of like change that happens. You're not going to handle it well. You're not going to embrace it. You're going to push back against everything. Uh, so if I understand your advice is for older people, almost go out of your way during the interview by maybe proactively bringing it up and saying like, I'm embracing learning new things, so that you can kind of deflect that stereotype if it is there, if they're making
mhm,
those assumptions about you, right?
yep,
What
yep.
are there any other, like, I can't think of any other ones, but are there any others that that people would make that kind of like assumption, a bias against older workers based on a stereotype? Is it just the training thing?
I
Maybe it's the person, like how they are at greeting people and relating to people or something. I don't know.
Well, and I think the other thing has to do with the team that you could be joining. If you are, I'm just going to pick an age. Let's just say that you're 60 and you're
Hmm.
going to be joining a team of 25-year-olds. How is that going to work with fitting in with the culture, which is what we were talking about earlier, which is with the behavior based.
Greetings, fellow kids. Yeah.
Yeah. So it works and is totally acceptable and can be really incredible with the innovation and creativity and all those things. What people are looking for in the interview process is not only someone who can do the job, but someone who can fit in with the team and the organization and the department. So what I would recommend doing is, if you do feel like you're older and you could be biased, or the hiring team could be biased against you for that, then do some research on the organization and the team that you would join based on the role and the information you have from the job posting. So search up the organization, find them on social media, look them up on LinkedIn, find the department and who else has that department associated with their profile, and try to do some sleuth work and identify how you might be able to fit in with the people who are in the organization already. Because the hiring team is not wanting to bring someone in who is going to completely ruin the good thing they've got going. They want to add someone in who's going to be able to really supplement and enhance the existing team. In most cases, there will be times where they're looking for someone to come in and completely shake things up, but they should also let you know that
Well,
they're attention.
I just want to point out some of the hypocrisy in this modern discussion because, first of all, on one hand, everybody's talking about diversity and how we need to be diverse. Now, I have been a proponent of this for a very long time, but it's not in the sense that it's usually discussed.
Yeah.
I don't just believe in, like diversity of like, what does everybody discuss? Ethnicity, sexual orientation, age, like gender, all that kind of. I've been a proponent of diversity of backgrounds, diversity of skill sets, diversity. Some people they have more education and less experience. Other people have more experience and less education. Things like this. This is the stuff that doesn't get talked about, the diversity of skill sets.
Right.
And so everybody loves talking about this, like till the cows come home. They like to virtue signal this stuff all the time. And LinkedIn is full of this. But then we get to actual real issues like this. Like here we've got somebody, Susan, asking a very common question about like age bias, right? And the problem is the way that this is regarded, it's all regarded in the context of fit. That's as far as I can tell. Like we have to talk about fit. So if you have, like you suggested, you have a team of 25-year-olds, and now we're considering a 50-year-old to join the team.
Yeah.
Now, this whole concept of fit, it's a diametric opposition to diversity because it's saying like, well, you wouldn't fit in. You're too different. Therefore, we have to hire this homogenous kind of type of employee so that they fit in with everyone. And it's like what I'm confused about is that sometimes people will prioritize the diversity angle. Sometimes people will prioritize fit. Mm-hmm. And it just seems that has no logic, rhyme, or reason. I mean, maybe it's up to the culture of the company, but still it's like, as a concept, these two counteract each other,
Absolutely. Well, and if you think about this as the problem, just to, simplify it a little bit, because it's multifaceted. There's a lot of things going on here.
Yeah, it's very complex.
The problem isn't actually with their interview process to hire for this role. If they're going to be saying, oh, we've got someone who's in their 50s or 60s joining a team of 25-year-olds. The problem was a long time ago when they built this team of just 25-year-olds and didn't incorporate the diversity earlier, because now they're really limiting the diversity of thought, the diversity of experience, and all of those things with this team, because now they're being limited by who they can hire because it's not going to fit in with the rest of the group. And so this is a huge conversation, and there's no solution when it comes to like us.
Well, I wouldn't say there's no solution. I mean, first of all, I feel bad about the people that have asked their question because I do want to get to them, but I also want to pursue this, and I want to say this. I don't think that maybe in the moment, like in a job interview, it might be optimal in that moment to say, well, this issue is beyond me. I'm just here to fill this role. I have to look at the practical side of this, what's going to have the highest likelihood of working out. But from an organizational perspective, it's like, you can't just say, well, it wasn't diverse in the past, therefore we can't ever change that now.
Right.
Like it just doesn't work. The other thing is that it's always harder getting different types of people to interoperate. Mm-hmm. You got a salesperson trying to operate with a engineer, like it's going to be challenging. They each have to learn several things to make that work.
Yep.
And I think that a lot of people, they from an organizational level, they shy away from that. They say, let's just do the easiest possible thing in the moment. Let's hire another uniform person and go against diversity. So anyway, it's just really interesting. I think that on an organizational level, there are some things you can do, but people never want to bite the bullet and pay the cost of that.
Because
so we're left with this contradiction.
Yeah, the change curve, when you think about change in an organization or change with anything,
Hmm.
usually you have your status quo. And then when you make a change, adding someone in who's different from the group that you are wanting to, different from the group that currently exists, things dip for a little bit. But then
Yeah.
you hit a point where it actually should start to increase.
Yeah.
So
If you've done it right. Yes.
right.
If you've supported it. Yes.
And I think that kind of coming back full circle with this conversation, as someone who is maybe older, who might be applying to work for a job that is with a group of 25-year-olds, just to say, it's up to you as the candidate to be able to pitch your experience and why you actually are a great fit for the role, even with this, lack of diversity going on right now. What makes you unique to this group of potential 25-year-olds that you could be working with? Why should they pick you over another 25-year-old who has very homogenous experience and education as the other people in that team? And if you can do that, hopefully at the same time, you also have a recruiter who is able to provide some, feedback to the hiring manager about why they shouldn't discount your experience and all of those things because of your age. And you have a hiring manager who is aware of the benefits of that diverse experience and background that you could be bringing. But as the candidate, if you don't address those things, they're not going to think that you could overcome some of those barriers or challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Job, which is
so
why
coming back to Susan,
yeah,
I want to suggest something and then I want to get your reaction to it and then we should move on. But
sure.
What I want to say to Susan is, in addition to what we already talked about at the beginning when we were answering your question, is I would point out basically what you just said. I say, like, look, I understand that, I'm probably one of the older candidates for this. However, okay, what I can bring is, number one, I can interoperate with younger people quite effectively.
Yep.
So that's not an issue. But then on top of that, I can bring a little bit of the benefits of diversity, having an older person in there with more experience. You already have a bunch of younger people, probably. They all can bring in that perspective. They can do work from that perspective. Great. I can bring this that adds a new flavor in to the team. So between the two of us, we can handle different situations. We come up with different ideas. We bring in more possibilities. It's just better to have a more diverse age range for the people in this role.
Yep.
Assuming that we can all operate together. And I make it a priority of mine to operate very well with people of all types, so that that's not going to be an issue with me, or something like that, and try and make an argument that way. And then that might be enough to persuade them and say, like, okay, this is a bit unconventional, but, I think it might be the right thing to do.
I agree. There's not much I would change about that type of presentation and selling of yourself in this type of situation. And really, to stand out in this really competitive job market, you have to intentionally sell yourself during the job interview process. And in order to do that effectively, you have to do your research ahead of time on the job itself, the team that you could be working with, the people who would be managing you, the organization as a whole. Like, there's a lot of things that go into this. So winging it is just not an option to success. So if you are in any interview situation, but especially if you're in a position where you feel like there could be some bias for your age, your whatever status you might be, etc., you have to intentionally do that research ahead of time so that you can pitch yourself as the most qualified and best fit candidate.
That's a good way of phrasing it, actually. Absolutely. Okay, let's get on with these questions. I'm sorry for delaying everybody here. Let's see. So Tully, if Tully is still here, Tully Mar says, are executive summaries recommended for a mid to senior level role? I believe yes, but it depends on what the form is. Are we talking about like a resume? That would be that section right at the very top. And I know you advocate for that, right, Abby? Like that.
I actually don't like having that top section because I think your resume is really valuable real estate. The times that I think that it's acceptable to have an executive summary or a professional statement or whatever you might call it is if it is specifically tailored to the role or the type of work that you will be doing. If it is vague and generic, take it off. You can make it a little bit more personal on a cover letter, But if it
Like
just
the
is,
professional summary, right? I think you like that. The idea of like pulling out the most relevant stuff
yep,
and putting it in that top section. So if you're talking about that,
yep,
great. And that will be customized to every job that you're doing.
yep, yep. And so I think if you put in the effort to customize that to your applications, then it's fine to keep it. But if it is
Okay.
just a vague, generic summary or statement, you have to remember that people, when they're people, recruiters, when they're looking at a cover letter or a resume specifically for the very first time, they spend 6 seconds on it. So big chunks of text, 3 to 5 lines or more, they're probably going to skim or skip over completely. And that space on your resume would likely be used more effectively with other information, like work experience or specific, tangible, hard skills that you have certifications in, demonstrating that you meet the minimum and preferred qualifications rather than just this flowery, vague, generic statement.
Yeah, and if I recall, now it's sort of coming back to me, the executive summary, that's like where, you kind of summarize yourself like, oh, I'm a, young executive looking for this.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of stuff. And the other thing is that they don't care about you.
Yeah,
Like, how can I put this delicately? They just don't care about you.
yeah,
They don't care about your career goals, your ambitions, where you've come from. All the employer cares about is, do you have what we're looking for? We care about what we're looking for, and that's it.
right.
That's the extent to which we care about you and your resume.
Yes.
So you give them what they care about, then they'll want to talk to you. It's just that
Yep.
simple.
Well, and I think Tully's comment continues into the next one, which says, I give a 30 to 60 to 90-day plan in my eyes. I realize they may have other things they want to work on, but I show my ideas. Some say it's overstepping. Now, I would not include that on a resume. I would not include that information on a resume because your resume should be this high level overview of your past experience in education that make you a good fit for the role that you're applying to. That could be maybe a supplemental document. Maybe you say 30, 60, 90-day plan. I would not include something like this in my initial application. It might be something that I bring with me to an interview and ask them if they're interested in seeing that. At the same time, I might not even bring it to the first round interview. I might bring it to the last interview after I've had some time to learn about the organization and the role and what they're looking for, what they're wanting this person to achieve, so that they can actually see what it is that I kind of am expecting from the position. But from an initial standpoint, I wouldn't include a 30, 60, 90-day plan, especially if you haven't talked to someone in the organization yet.
I agree. Like, Tully, this is a good thing that you're doing. It's a good thing that you're thinking like this, that you're willing to put the thought in and put the work in to do this. Uh, it shows some great qualities about you. So
Mhm.
I want to say that first, and then I want to say this. It's great that you've done it, but this is the wrong place for it.
Yeah.
Like, for example, when you greet someone and you say, hey, like, I think we might be able to work together, and then you talk to them for 2 hours, and then at the end you say, okay, well, I'll tell you what, based on what we've talked about, I'm going to go away, I'm going to make this plan like what we talked about, and I'm going to send it to you, right? That's how you end. Now imagine if you started that conversation by saying, hey, it's great to meet you, so I'm going to go away, I'm going to make a big massive report on like your company, and then I'm going to send it to you, and then I'm hoping that you can give me feedback on it. It's like, that would be inappropriate to start with, even though you say that exact same thing later on in the encounter, right?
Yes.
So
Now,
it's just the placement is wrong, but
yes.
the idea is good.
Tully had a comment a little bit earlier saying that they nailed their third interview and that they're going to go meet the team and hear about next steps in the next week. Now, this could be a good opportunity to maybe put one of these together to give the team that you're going to be meeting with, depending on who is there, if that's kind of what's been discussed. If you are expected to provide these sorts of plans, if you are expected to have this sort of vision and lead a team in this direction, that seems like a good time to do that. But if it's in the initial kind of baby phase of this interview process, don't broach that subject yet.
Yeah, it's tough to like give advice because I'm trying to think of like what I would think if somebody did that to me. If I was like, interviewing them for a job, and they were one of the candidates, and I talked to them a couple of times, and then they said, "Oh, I've prepared this plan, this like 30, 60, 90-day plan for you, or for either my involvement with you or for you to take this thing forward that you're working on. I'm trying to think how I would react. I'm thinking like I probably would not react well. I would not like it's not a negative, but it's like, well,
Like,
I
thanks.
didn't ask for that. I don't really need that. That's not really what I need from you.
Mhm.
So if anything, it kind of signals that we're not perfectly in tune as to what's going on
Yeah.
right now.
I
But
think
then again,
withdrawal.
if they blew me out of the water with their plan, I read it and it was like, whoa, this is actually really, really good. Then it could be a positive. So I mean that's what makes it so difficult to say should you do it or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think if they ask you this type of question during an interview, like, tell me about what you expect you would accomplish in the first 30, 60, 90 days, then I might give a high level overview and then follow up my interview with an email saying, here's a little bit more in depth thought process of what my
Yeah.
first 30, 60, 90 days would sound like. Doing it unprompted could be a little bit, I guess, overstepping, as some might have said to you in the past, Tully, because it's making a lot of assumptions about what
Yeah.
you are going to do and what they need without truly hearing what it is that they're expecting from you in this new role. Now, if you
So
are, go ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think therefore what my kind of final recommendation is if you think that you've got something, of value here, Tully, that you think they're going to like it, it's gonna land well, then go for it and see how it does. I mean, it's impossible to predict this stuff without ever actually trying it, right? So try it, and if in future you're in the same position and you want to do this kind of thing again, try it. But after 2 or 3 times of doing this kind of thing, it never leads to anything, then I would say don't do this going forward. The results speak for themselves. It's a
And
good
that's a lot
thought.
of effort to put in to not get any, I guess, response or benefit from going through this type of thing.
Yeah.
If you put together a 30, 60, 90-day plan and you spend even an hour on it, 30 minutes, like that is time that you're not going to get back that you could have probably used to do something else.
Yeah, it's a gamble, and the only way to know if it works for you is to try it. So if you feel you got something of value, go for it. But if you're kind of unsure, you're not sold on the idea yourself, I would say hold back, because it is quite a gamble.
Mhm.
We got Constantin says, hi, Bill and Abby. And they said that about half an hour ago. So hi, Constantin. Thank you for being here. Tully says, to the person talking about age, embrace your age. You have experience. You know what you are doing. Absolutely. But we're also talking about the way it's perceived to others, right? And that's something you don't always have control over.
Yep.
Constantin, I have an interview tomorrow with a hiring manager, third interview after 2 interviews with HR and engineering team. What to do? Oh, where do we start?
Yes. Well, having an interview tomorrow, you don't have a lot of time to prepare, but you have enough to be able to get a good start. So what I would do is I would head over to an AI platform like ChatGPT or Grok and basically put that exact same information in there. I would copy your resume and the job posting and paste those into the prompt as well. And say, this interview is with the hiring manager. The first, I guess it's the hiring manager. And then the first 2 interviews sound like it was HR, as maybe the first interview, and the second interview was the engineering team. Describe some of the things that they talked about in the past interviews. Ask for ChatGPT or Grok or whatever platform you use to generate questions that are specific to a hiring manager, the person who would likely be your boss.
Yeah.
And maybe even ask it to analyze your resume compared to the job posting for blind spots or areas of concern for the hiring manager, and see if it comes up with any ideas. That way you can be prepared to address any of those concerns. And then you can also practice some of those interview questions. And I'm going to paste it in the chat. I think you'll be able to see it because it looks like you're watching this from my stream. But I actually have a video that is a mock interview video. And you could use that to try to give some responses to interview questions. It's very generic. It's not specific to engineering or anything like that. But it could be a good place to start. So I'll find that right now and I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah, and then just keep in mind that the hiring manager, I think that the number one factor that they care about is likability. They've already put you through a couple of interviews. which presumably have confirmed that you have the technical chops to do the job. So I would suspect that in this situation, the hiring manager is just coming in with that assumption you could do the job. The question now is, are you the person that they would want to work with, or is somebody else the person they would prefer to work with?
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Be very agreeable, very friendly, and then to a degree, maybe mirror the manager, like in terms of their personality and, like how outgoing they are and stuff like this. I mean, that's kind of like, I mean, I don't know if you would recommend that, Abby. It's kind of a general rule.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're meeting someone for the first time and you want to get along with them and have them have an instant rapport, you would, you wouldn't necessarily mirror everything they do, but you would like be tuned into that.
Yeah.
You're wanting to them to like you, so you would want to be like them to a degree, if you can.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, that is a psychological technique, is mirroring the other person to kind of meet them where they're at. If I am interacting with someone who is really smiley and bubbly and has a lot of hand motion,
cracking jokes, big sort of,
green light to also maybe up my movement and my smiling, and maybe be a little bit more like, not cracking jokes necessarily, but being a little bit more not like constrained and held back. If the interviewer is very like no affect on their, no emotion showing on their face, they're very
stone-faced, like a straight to business.
Yep, they're following their procedure on their paper in front of them, then you might be a little bit more restrained.
Straight to business, like an accountant. That's right. Yeah, all those like accounting jokes that we've heard of and love, right?
Uh-huh.
No, you've got to do the one-upsmanship when it comes to the jokes there. They crack some really loud joke. You've got to like outdo them, right? Yep. Until it escalates into a scene, right? That's how you've made an impression.
Yep. Post it on YouTube so we can watch it.
There you go. That's right. Gives everyone a good laugh. Josera, if I'm saying that right. I'm sure I'm not, but that's okay.
It's actually Jose Ramos, I think.
Okay. Well, I was almost there. Okay. Just to work on my continental accent. Is there a book that can help me improve my job interviewing skills? I'm not going to recommend a book unless Abby would like to recommend a book. But what I am going to do is I'm going to direct you to a couple of resources here. This is my course, my Get Hired course. It's all my advice in one place. Interviewing is part of it. Okay, so that's to learn the technicalities of it. So that's definitely a thing. Now, Abby has some resources that are specifically designed, I believe, for working on people's interviewing technique. So I'm just going to put this up, and if you want to lead us through it, Abby.
Yeah, so this is for a one-on-one session with me. I do mock interviews, but specifically an interview strategy session is where I help people improve their overall interview skills. If you are looking for something that is a little bit more self-paced, or you do on your own, then I think Bill's courses are good starting places, as well as the videos that you're probably seeing on both of our channels. If you're looking for a specific book, there's not one that I can recommend on specific job interview skills. I do have a couple of book recommendations. I'll put it in the chat to Amazon, where you can buy the books for yourself. But really, if you are preparing for an upcoming interview, an interview strategy session can be really beneficial, because we go over what types of things you can expect from the interview. And then we can even dive into certain questions that could come up, or your answers to specific questions that you expect to come up. And most people, after a single session, feel like their confidence has increased, and they feel a lot more prepared for that interview, and they know what to do between the end of our session to when their interview starts to really set themselves up for success.
Yeah, and you have a lot of resources like for this kind of thing. Like, for example, Abby can sort of give you her reaction to this, but I would say that preparing for job interviews, it's kind of a two-phase or two-step process. The first phase is something you do yourself. You learn what the common job interview questions are. You learn what the answers are, and you figure out what your answers are going to be for all these common questions. Same with behavioral questions, another type of question. There are like a million of those, literally. So you figure out what your answers are going to be for those, right? And then phase two, which is something that a lot of people skip to their detriment, is where you work with somebody else. Now, the poor person's version of that is to grab a friend or a family member. Um, and the more professional person's version of it is to hire a career coach. I'm not a career coach. Abby is a career coach. And the purpose of this is to actually learn by practice. Practice makes perfect. So you're going to do mock interviews. You're going to do pretend interviews with the other person, right? And
Yep.
you do these over and over and over again. And, after you've done like 40 of these, maybe 3 or 4 a day for about 10 days, uh, you won't have a problem with the vast majority of what you're going to do in an interview, because you know all the questions backwards and forwards. You've heard them all. You've had so much practice in saying your answers and dealing with what the interviewer says. You've also been desensitized a little bit to the awkwardness of being put on the spot and being asked these pointed questions. So you learn by doing. Practice makes perfect. And so you've got a lot of resources, between courses and practice and career coaches and other things, videos. There's a lot of things to help you out there. Find something that works for your way of learning.
And most people just stick to that kind of first phase of the job search, or interview prep process, which is going at it by themselves. But you really can elevate your interview strategy as well as your job search success by involving other people. Ideally, someone who doesn't know you as well, who can provide you with very objective, actionable feedback. That likely is someone like me, an interview coach, or someone who, is at a local workforce center or at your local library who you can coordinate with. Someone who doesn't know you and isn't really worried about hurting your feelings, or has like background knowledge about who you are and what you do and why. Because that's what an interviewer is. An interviewer is likely someone you've never met before and you've never talked about, who's going to be making some judgments and assumptions about you when it comes to your responses to those types of questions and your overall engagement with them during this process. So
Absolutely. That's a great point, because you're getting two things out of doing the mock interview. One is it's practice for you, which I mentioned, but Abby is absolutely correct. That's the second thing. If you're working with a professional like an interview coach or career coach, you have the added advantage that they can give you that feedback, and they can give you an honest appraisal of what first impression you're giving off. That's the thing. We're all like, the vast majority of people are wonderful. Once you get to know them, they're very personable, and you know their quirks. But that doesn't mean that everybody makes an amazing first impression the first time you meet them. You know what I'm saying? And the goal of job interviews is to make that amazing first impression. So they only see you once, but in that one interview, they go away thinking, wow, that person's clearly awesome.
Yes.
So
Well, and I have a mock interview that's coming to mind for me with a client who, I used to work in training and development, and this person was trying to get a job in training and development. So I was a little biased with knowing what that type of industry was. And at the same time, I was able to give them pretty specific feedback about their body language during our mock interview and their response to these interview questions. They weren't necessarily responding exactly how I might respond. So because I was in the industry, I had a little bit of that bias there, but it was saying, if you're wanting to get into this industry, people are going to be wanting to make eye contact with you while they're communicating with you. All of my mock interviews are done virtually via Zoom, and I record them so that the person who is doing the mock interview with me can go back and rewatch it, and they can listen to their responses. They can also then observe their own body language in this mock interview. And so this person was not making eye contact with the camera. They were like looking down at their, desk or whatever it was.
You can see yourself squirm, under the pressure. Yeah.
And then they were also not using a very, their tone and their inflection in their voice was missing. It was very monotone and robotic, and it was hard to interact with that person. And so they might have been able to go back and rewatch that and listen to how hard it was to interact with them. And it was because they were uncomfortable. It's not a normal situation to be in an interview. And at the same time, if you can desensitize yourself from that from some of that discomfort, and you can become a little bit more comfortable in that artificial environment, you're probably going to do much better during an interview.
Yeah, my God, man, you look terrible. You're about to have a heart attack. Well, the thing is, like, nobody is instantly good at things like job interviews. It's a fallacy. I don't care who you are. Nobody's like instantly amazing. It takes practice, like anything else in life. You practice things enough, you end up kicking ass. It's just that simple. So this is a skill like any other. The more of them you do, the better you will get. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the name of the game.
Yeah.
Puneet says they are harassing me again. They have given me so much to what? Okay, I have no idea what this means.
I have no idea either. So,
Just,
Puneet, if you can clarify, we'll look for your comment in the chat a little bit later.
if you could clarify your gibberish, please, that would really help. Susan says something very gracious. You're welcome, Susan. Susan says, luckily, my number one skill is selling myself in an interview. Just haven't done it at this age. Thanks for the pep talk. I feel more prepared for pep talk. I like to think we did more than that, but thank you, Susan. I think you're going to be fine. I think it sounds like you know what you're doing, and any assertion that like somebody is somehow less valuable because they're a little bit older, I think is idiotic. I've had issues with some of the things that I've heard recruiters say to me, like to my face when I was younger, things like, oh, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And, like things like this. And it's like, are you kidding me? That clearly isn't true by the fact that the people running things are usually older people. You've got 30 plus years experience. You know what I mean? Just because you're older doesn't mean you're any less valuable. It usually means the opposite. So don't feel too bad about that stuff.
Right.
Let's see here. LK, is it a must for job experience timeline on a resume to be chronological? No, but I think it's more common, right, Abby? It's much more common.
Yeah. Well, and this person, is saying they want to put their most relevant job experience at the top of their resume. So what I would recommend doing is titling your work experience section as relevant professional experience, and then only picking the things that are relevant to the job. So I do think that
that's a great tip.
Yeah, I think the recruiter would be a little confused if the like different jobs are out of order. They're not in a like understandable or maybe straightforward order. This reverse chronological order is the most common. Maybe you flip it for some reason, but what I wouldn't do is keep them jumbled. I would instead do the relevant professional experience and only pick what's relevant from your most recent job and then kind of go from there. So your first listing of your job experience might be a small chunk, and then you might have a job that's way more relevant that has a lot more bullet points a little bit further down in that section. So I would attempt to keep it in reverse chronological order, and then only include the relevant details. And if there is a job that is completely not relevant, then you don't need to include it. So that relevant professional experience gives you some flexibility of what you get to include and what you don't need to include. Because it's relevant professional experience, you can also include unpaid experience if it is relevant. So things like volunteer work, internships, things like that, if it's relevant. And you don't have to get paid to be able to conduct yourself in a professional manner.
Like there used to be something called a functional resume where, you didn't put dates on everything. You just put what you could do, like basically your capabilities, right? And then you had something called a hybrid resume, which was kind of like, most resumes are like 2 pages, so the first half of the first page was kind of like, it wasn't chronological. It was like sort of a summary of your skills and your capabilities and your accomplishments. Like I used to have a hybrid resume back in the day, and then you list your relevant experience in chronological form, like a regular resume.
Yep.
But I kind of get the impression that those things, like I never hear anyone talk about them. So I think the standard really is the chronological thing, and that's the expectation. And the danger of deviating from that really is if they can't see the dates, they're going to regard that as a red flag. right? Like Abby, is that kind of how you would react to someone who sent in their resume? There weren't any dates on,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
I would be wondering how old this experience is and why they might be trying to conceal it. You can see
Yeah.
how this person who's reviewing your resume for the first time and doesn't actually get a chance to talk to you can quickly spiral to make some negative assumptions about the candidates.
Yeah. That's the
So
problem.
you want it to be as easy to read and understand. And I like the idea more of a hybrid resume versus the true functional resume. Functional resumes still exist. People do use them out, from time to time. But the most common thing that I think recruiters are expecting is the traditional reverse chronological order resume. I think that instead of a functional resume, if you could do a reverse chronological resume and then go into some detail about your previous experience and background in a cover letter, that to me seems like a better fit that would align with what a recruiter is expecting to see in an application.
Yeah, like I like your tip of basically doing the regular chronological resume, but you have that one section right at the front that's professional experience, which means you can pull from anywhere and just put whatever you think is like the most relevant that's going to sell you
Yep.
in that like section right up front. So in a way, it's kind of like it's getting the best of the functional resume type stuff,
Yep.
but then there's no issues of like, why are you not disclosing this? And,
Yep.
you know, what's like, it's conspicuous why you're not putting dates or there's gaps or how old everything is. So you avoid any questions like that.
And I think this is another great opportunity to utilize AI to give you some ideas on how your existing experience and your most recent experience is relevant to the career or industry that you're switching back to. So if you have access to your current job description, you could put that into ChatGPT or Grok, and you could ask it to analyze your current job description and identify the transferable relevant skills for the pasted job posting that you want to apply to. And you could ask it to come up with 10 quantifiable bullet points, and it's going to make up metrics and things like that. So you'll need to tailor it specifically to your experience so that the information is true and accurate. But it's a really great way to get some creative juices flowing to see how what you were doing in your most recent position is actually relevant and related to this industry that you're moving back to.
The only other thing I want to say is what comes into this conversation too with changing careers. I know you're changing back or whatever, but it's like usually people don't do that kind of stuff by going through the official hiring process.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it technically might still be possible to do, but or it should be. But the problem is that if you haven't done the job before, it's hard to demonstrate to, say, a recruiter that you can. The first question out of their mouth is going to be, how many years experience do you have doing this? And if your answer is, well, I have zero, I'm changing careers. So usually when you make those kind of moves, you're doing it with networking, you're talking to the hiring managers, you're convincing them like, look, I've got what it takes to do this. Just give me a chance. And they might say, yeah, we have a kind of a part-time position, or we have something that I could take a chance on you and just see how you do, maybe for 6 months. That's a frequent way people end up truly changing careers is by that mechanism. So just keep that in mind, because it presents some real challenges when you say, I have 0 years experience doing this because I'm changing careers.
Yeah. And in reality, that's where your transferable skills actually come in.
Yes.
While you may have 0 years of experience in this specific job title.
Yeah.
Probably have a lot of experience doing the tasks and the responsibilities and the things that are required day to day in this position.
Yeah. Well, the reality is you can do the job. So
Yeah.
yes, you have the skills. There are transferable skills, but I've always felt that in practice, it still is a leap of faith, for people to say, well, you have the transferable skills, but then again, you've never done it. And if we were to recommend you and turns out you're terrible and we have to let you go, it's a reflection on me for, like you should have seen it from the person's resume. They never were in the role. So, I mean, I know it does happen, and it happens in more forward thinking, more innovative environments, where they don't stand on ceremony with a lot of that stuff. But I guess you see, I'm in a city that's very conservative across all industries. They're very conservative, and so this would be more of a showstopper in the environment that I just personally happen to be in. And I know some people out there are in those types of environment.
Yeah.
If you're in like a major city and you're in an industry that's extremely competitive and the employers are very innovative, they're using like very innovative thinking, they're always like trying new things, and they're trying to outmaneuver their competitors, and and they think like that. That's when they're going to be able to take chances on employees by thinking of like transferable skills and stuff like this. I would suspect, Abby. I don't know if that's what you see.
Yeah,
So it does vary.
it does.
Anyway, I need to dial it down. Okay.
That's okay. We get passionate about these things, okay?
Yes, that's right. You have to fly into a blinding rage. McLevin says, "What is your advice if I'm told I'm too skilled for dish cleaning but lack experience for the field I graduated?" I'm sorry, you're unemployable. You're too qualified to be somebody washing dishes, but you're unproven as a lawyer. So there just isn't any place for you. That is like a real gap. We see that when people want to move into management, where say you've got a lot of experience as a worker, maybe you've got an education, you've gone to business school or something like this, and you get into this wonderful position where you're overqualified to be the worker, but yet you're unproven as a manager because you haven't been in that role. That's a very real thing. I don't know if it has a name, that gap.
Yeah, I don't know either. But I
You know,
think that, if you are told that you're too skilled for washing dishes, but you lack the experience in the field that you graduated in, you've got to find a way to bridge that gap.
yes.
So if you're applying to dishwashing jobs and you're not getting those because they think you're too qualified, then I think it's, there's a couple of questions there as to why you're applying to those types of jobs when you have a degree and maybe the capability of working in a different field. So that's one thing that I would want to explore if you were a client of mine. Why are you looking for those types of jobs? But there is a way to bridge that gap. So if you are just not sure where to start, then maybe you look into temp work. Maybe you go to your local workforce center if you're in the United States, and you start building some skills, whether it's computer skills, administrative skills. Maybe you go back to a trade school and you get very tangible skills to, work in the trades, electrical, plumbing, carpentry, whatever that might be, construction. So there's ways to bridge this gap. I think that if you were just exclusively applying to the dish cleaning jobs, then, and they're turning you down for that, then I would ask them why. There's probably a lot of people who can do it, but not a lot of people who want to do it. So if you want to do it, then, why are they limiting that? And at the same time, do you want to do that? If the answer is no, and you're going to be moving on pretty quickly, then why waste your time interviewing for dish cleaning jobs and trying to work there when you're going to move on to something different in the future, especially when there's not like a bridge from dish cleaning to whatever a degree you got.
Yeah. See, I used to know this. There was 3 standard options, and I can only remember 2. I can't remember what the third one was. It's probably the most useful one. But one option was you get employed in a small company because they're not quite as picky about your experience as maybe a large corporate thing, right? So if you've got like, you're trying to bridge that gap, you're washing dishes, but maybe you've got a law degree or a business degree or engineering degree or something, and you find that nobody will give you a chance in the world of engineering or law or business because you're unproven. You haven't had a career job before. You can sometimes get around that by going to like a really small company, like a startup or something, where they're less picky about that stuff. They care more about who you are, what you can do, and they're less hung up on your work history. They don't pay as much, but that's how you can get that title. And then once you've got the title, you can move sideways to a bigger employer, and away you go. The second option is to work as a lead hand, or whatever you call it. It's like the unofficial manager position, where it's like you're still technically a worker, you're a jumped up worker, but you're really doing the job of a manager. You're supervising people, and you're making schedules, and you're trying to meet goals, and like things like this. You're essentially unofficially a manager. So that allows you to move into that role within like a larger employer,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody's going to worry about like, well, you've never technically been a manager before, so we're reluctant to put you in the manager role. This allows you to de facto be doing it, and then you can move from there into a manager role, especially within the same organization, because like what Abby said, you've demonstrated all the skills necessary to be the manager, so that they are more inclined to give you a chance by officially changing your position. So those are the two of the three. I can't remember what the hell the third one was, but there was a third standard way of bridging that gap. I need to go look that up. But anyway, you could maybe look that up. Go to ChatGPT and like say, this is my problem. I understand this is a well-known problem. There's like an employment gap where you're too qualified for this, but you're unproven in this. So how do you go from this to that and bridge that gap? Maybe it can give you the other options there. I know there's at least one big one.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay. Oh, here we go with Sheen and Griff. I know this person, Sheen and Griff. How do we go from simple 1 to 2 interview rounds to 6 rounds with stuff like take-home tasks, culture fit, and so on? I had to talk to people I never worked with. When looking back, well, that's like saying, well, why did the HR industry evolve from the 1970s to what we have today? And it's like about 5 steps forward, possibly 4 or 5 back. I'm not sure.
Yeah, this is one of the most frustrating things to me about the interview process is this extreme shift from pretty easy, quick decision making and a short process to a long, drawn out, very involved process. And yet it's still happening. So we can't just be frustrated with it and complain about it. We got to prepare ourselves that the interview and the hiring process might take this long, and there might be some aspects to this. I think the benefit to this shift from 1 to 2 interview rounds to 6+ rounds with all this stuff is that it's telling us, at least is that the hiring team is being very intentional about who they're picking to join their team. And they're hoping that the person who goes through this process and does ultimately join their team will stick around for a while. That isn't the case in a lot of industries and jobs now. People will leave within the first 1 to 2 years in most cases. But the price of having a vacant position and working to fill that position is usually 1.5 of that person's year salary just to fill the position and the vacancy and the extra work that it costs and all that. So the goal is to find someone who is a fantastic fit, who's going to stick around for a while to make that type of cost worth it. So,
and we seem to be getting worse and worse at that too, because the dwell times or whatever you call it get lesser and lesser, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah. Mm-hmm. So it is frustrating that the process has evolved to be this involved and this long and drawn out, and at the same time demonstrates to me that hopefully the hiring team is taking it pretty serious as to who they want to hire and that they want to find the right person. But I do think there's a limit. I think 4 interviews is the max that anyone should have to go through, and having take-home tasks and all of these things, like it should happen maybe once max during the interview process, not after every round. Having interviews that are more than an hour also seems a little bit strange to me, unless you're bringing someone in and they're meeting with different people all at this, like in the same day, and they're touring facilities and things like that.
Yeah, you're right. When you think about it, that it shouldn't, I mean, why would you need to talk to someone for more than it's not even like a free flowing discussion. It's just like an interrogation,
Yeah. So. Yeah. So when interviews are scheduled for, an hour and a half to 2 hours, I'm like, why? What are they talking about in this interview? Because it just seems like they can pretty quickly make up their mind if this person is going to be a good fit or not within the first 5 minutes. So why waste everyone's time with that type of long interview?
Yeah. Now, I got to say something here. I know this isn't the whole reason, but this is certainly a factor, and this applies some places more than others. But, here I go again because I'm so cynical. One of the reasons why they involve 1 million people in this process is so they can diffuse responsibility. So there's no one person that said, we're going to hire them. Because if that person then turns out to be a terrible employee and they have to leave in disgrace and, it's very embarrassing, it's a reflection on the person that made the call to hire them, right? So it's a well-known tactic that if you can sort of involve 15 people in this decision, then no one can blame you if you were the person that made the call because they all signed off on it, right? So you can't blame me. It's the other reason why things like psychometrics, it's one of the factors why those kind of external tools and tests are coming in, is people like them because it's you saying, hey, not my fault. The test said that they were a good candidate, so you can't blame me, right? I'm just going off the results, the data that I'm given, right? So that also is a factor in some of this stuff.
Well, and on the opposite end of that spectrum, one of them is to diffuse the responsibility. Well, I wasn't the one who made the hiring decision. I might have been involved in the process, but it wasn't me. The other end is fear of being left out and feeling like my decision is more important than someone in HR. So I should be involved in the hiring process. But because I'm so important and make myself so important, I have very limited time. So this person's going to need to be drawn out through like there's so much policy.
Yes. And then the second order effect is that they're demonstrating they don't trust the people whose actual job it is to make the call because they have to stand over their shoulder and second guess them and sign off on it. It's like, that's what you're communicating. You're showing that, like, these people aren't actually trustworthy. I have to be involved in everything, it just, there's no end to it, right? There's all these kinds of issues.
Yep.
So it doesn't really, it's neither here nor there for when we talk about how to get through this process, but that's some of the forces that are actually going on behind the scenes. That's why you get things like fake jobs. You get things like totally confusing outcomes where they interview you 6 times and then ghost you, like things like this. There's a lot of that stuff going on the back end, especially in larger organizations.
Yep.
That's what contributes to it.
Yep.
We've only got a few minutes left, so let's see if we can get through these here. We got Femi Williams says, hey, Bill and Abby, just wanted to thank you both for your career insights. I've landed a Boeing interview next week through networking, also an MBDA interview. MBDA, once again, what's that again? I think somebody told me what that was.
I don't know. I'll have to look it up. It
might be like MDNA, kind of, party,
Yeah, it's a looks like it's
just a job interview, but everyone's on ecstasy. That's the very very latest thing.
Oh, that's funny.
Surprisingly, it turns out they make 50% better decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But that's great to hear, Femi Williams. Congratulations.
Yes, and I know Femi. Femi also let me know that he was following a lot of your advice about networking and was able to make a lot of good connections with people, and it's led to good conversations that have then ultimately helped lead to.
It's obviously a fine, upstanding individual. Then that's impeccable taste. I gotta admit. So that's great, and thanks for letting us know, Femi. That's wonderful. Okay, I've been out of work for close to a year now, but very hopeful that I'm close to seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, working hard on my preps, and will leave the result in God's hands. You can only do what you can do. Listen, like you take your best shot, do the best you can. Don't leave anything to chance. Do cross every T, dot every I. And, you can't do any more than that, but keep moving forward. Obviously we all hope that this will be the one and this is going to work out. But regardless, keep moving forward. Don't ever stop to hear about what might be happening. Keep moving forward. Do this and then start pursuing other opportunities. Never stop looking.
Yep. I agree.
Manic Ghost says, have an interview tomorrow. I've been watching your videos. Do you have any advice? Yes. They were in all my videos. Also, how should I approach the salary part? I know how much the job is paying. Should I give them a number? I would say no, but that's in person. Sometimes you can't avoid it on a form, right?
Right. And, having an interview tomorrow, we have just talked about the things that you can do to help prep for that interview and give yourself a little bit of a leg up when it comes to your preparation for your interview tomorrow. Go back a few minutes in this live stream where we talked about using AI to help you with that. I think that when it comes to your salary, knowing what their salary range is very helpful. A lot of job postings don't include that information. So if you know how much the job is paying, then I'm wondering if that's a range or if that's their stated number and how that aligns with your minimum or if that's above or below what that looks like. So I would say if this is the first interview, don't broach pay until they bring it up. If this is like the third or fourth round interview and pay hasn't been discussed, then I think it's time to ask what the hiring budget is for this position. And if you can ask the question, and I specifically like the phrasing of what I just said, which is the hiring budget for this position, that then gives you a little bit of insight on what type of flexibility there may or may not be with the hiring range. And a lot of times organizations will post the full salary range, which is the minimum someone could get paid in this position and the maximum someone could get paid. And that really confuses people. So if you talk about the hiring budget, that limits what they're expecting to pay when this person is brought on. And then if you ask them the question, it kind of puts the ball in their court to give you a number. If they ask you what your salary expectations are, you need to be prepared and have done your research. You need to know what the market is kind of looking like for people who are in this type of role in your area. You need to know how much you're willing to take and how much what your wiggle room looks like. If they ask you for a number, you want to give a pretty specific number. There's a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, and he is a negotiation expert, FBI hostage negotiator. And he recommends that you give such a specific number, not just like $100,000, but $106,000.82 or something like that, like very specific number, because that indicates to the person who you're negotiating with that you've done your research and you've come to a conclusion that this specific number is what you are looking for. So if you haven't listened to that book or you haven't read that book, you can get a clip of it on YouTube. Again, it's called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And ultimately, you want them to give you a number first. If they just refuse to do that, then that's when you provide your number. And you don't want it to be the minimum you would accept. You probably want it to be higher than what you would accept so that you can have some negotiating room.
We're going to need $106,085, or we snuff the mayor. That's the bottom line. So he would know all about that. He's probably been in that exact situation before. That's good. Listen, Abby's got a lot of videos on her channel. Some of them addressed salary question. I've got a lot of videos on my channel. I've got a ton of them talking about salary. So between the two of us, there's a lot of stuff there. So go deeper as you need to. Femi Williams says, would it be fine if I took a copy of my CV to the interview and wrote down on it questions I intend to ask during the interview so I don't forget? Absolutely. Or should I just have those questions in mind only? No, bring stuff. I would recommend that.
I do too.
Yeah.
If you have like a Padfolio, a leather bound folder essentially, where you can have a lined piece of paper where you can write some notes to jog your memory if you forget something, or write down the questions you want to ask at the end of your interview. Have that pre-prepared. Have that prepared.
Yeah.
And then also, so it sounds like you were wondering if you should take a copy of your CV and write down the questions on it. What I would do instead is bring a copy of your CV for the number of people that you anticipate being in the interview and see if they would like a copy in person. Give them copies of your resume and then have your own copy that could potentially have questions written down on it if you don't have a Padfolio. Another good thing is to have like business cards or just something to bring. But I think having notes that you can review and that you can look at shows that you did your preparation, that you are enthusiastic and excited about the position. And I always equate it to, if you were hired into this position and you are responsible for managing a meeting and you showed up with no notes, nothing, no agenda, they would probably be a little concerned about your management of that meeting. If you're in a meeting and you are expected to take something away from that meeting, you have tasks, you have deadlines, things like that, and you don't write anything down, they're going to be concerned that you're going to forget what you're supposed to do.
You showed up with nothing, at least, and you forgot to wear pants.
Oh, yes. But having notes and taking notes, having notes prepared and also taking notes during the interview just demonstrates your professionalism and your competency and your preparedness for the interview.
Yeah, like I'm not sure if it's possible to do this or people would want to do this, but like it's good to have like Abby said, like a Padfolio. What I used to use kind of unprofessionally was like a pad of like Post-it notes, kind of like this.
Yeah.
And what I would do is when someone's asking me questions, I'd have a pen in my hand and I'd have a post-it note kind of stuck to the table. And I just, if they're asking me like a multi-part question, I would write down not the whole question as they're asking, but just like, okay, you're asking about this first thing, and then that second thing, and then this, in this context, or something like that. So that when I'm answering, because sometimes it's kind of nerve wracking, you got all these people like staring at you or whatever. So I glanced down to what I wrote on the page. It's like, okay, I got to tie it to this. I got to address the second part of the question, talk about that context. It prevents you from, getting sidetracked or whatever, or forgetting what the question was.
Yep.
So it's good to have that. So when they're asking you questions, which is the majority of the interview, I'd recommend people do your own version of that, something that works for you. If that's why it's great to have like a pen or pencil and paper. I know it's old school, but like as long as you're not like answering questions by staring down at your resume or your papers or something, it's not an issue. For most people, it's going to be perfectly fine.
And I recommend the same thing. Bring something to write notes down for the exact reason that you mentioned, Bill. Like if they have a multi-question question, you want to write down the different pieces of that question so you can answer it in full. And again, people are like, well, what if I'm not allowed to do that? Or what if they think poorly of me because I do that? Put yourself in the position, the actual role that you're interviewing for. And if you were to go to a meeting with your boss and you were to just show up and sit there with your arms crossed and just like spitball with them, but then walk away with nothing, like that's kind of the expectation, is probably that you're going to be tracking those details, that you have deadlines, that you're going to make a follow-up, or something's going to happen to demonstrate that you are paying attention and that you are not going to let anything fall through the cracks. And taking notes during that meeting would be a way to do that. So it's demonstrating something that you would be doing in the actual role in the interview to prove your competency and professionalism.
Yeah, get the little attaché case, the leather attaché case, black, glossy. You open it, it's got like highly professional paper, like banker type paper. You got the steel pen, or the brass pen that looks like gold, click, click, very professional, first question kind of thing. I don't think a lot of people are going to say like, no, sorry, you're not allowed to have a piece of paper in this room or something. And if they do, it's like you're interviewing for Chuck E. Cheese or something. I mean, like I don't think it's going to come up. You know what I mean? Yeah. As long as you're not amateur or unprofessional in how you do things, there's no issue with this stuff. It's actually preferable than even bringing a device and having a device on the table. That's kind of a bit of a faux pas, because people don't like that. People think you might be recording them, or you're distracted by you're waiting for a text or something. Yeah. So there's issue with that. But if you just have papers on the table, I don't think anyone in their right mind is going to have an issue with that.
No.
Anyway, we have to cut this off. We've kind of reached our hard stop. I would like Abby to just briefly kind of, pitch, like, if people want to go deeper and avail themselves of your services.
Yes. So if you are looking to prepare for an interview, whether you've definitely got an interview scheduled that's coming up soon, or you think you might have some interviews coming up and you just want to get ready for those potential interviews, consider scheduling an interview strategy session with me. These are 45 minutes through Zoom, and we discuss a lot of different things. I usually will ask for a copy of your resume, as well as for a copy of the job posting or postings that you've been applying to, so that I can have an idea of what sort of work you're looking for. We can talk about what types of questions you can expect during this interview, what the process may or may not look like based on who you're talking to, whether it's a recruiter, a hiring manager, doing a panel interview, etc. And then I also give you, what I do for all of my clients is I put together a multi-page document that talks about the 10 core competencies associated with the types of jobs that you're applying to, that you can then build stories around to help you answer any interview question. I identify some blind spots or areas of concern that could come up during the interview. And then I prepare a minimum of 30 questions, 10 behavior-based, 10 technical questions, and 10 situational questions that can help you prepare for your interview as well. So it's really helpful for people in just feeling confident and prepared for their upcoming interview. And you usually only need one session to feel that way.
Yeah, excellent. So if you're looking for help with interviewing and helping, and also help for like larger elements of your job search, check out Abby's stuff. If you're watching this from her channel, You obviously can get to that stuff. If you're watching it from my channel, there is a link in the description box under this live stream that has a link to her channel, so you can check that out. And if you're here, check out this course if you want to go deeper with me. I don't do coaching, but I have courses, so it's a lot more efficient if you're just looking for the information. So check out this course. It's linked in the description box below. Certainly, if you're watching this on my channel. Um, and it basically tells you how to get hired in the posted job market and in the hidden job market. And it's also tailored more to introverts and technical people. So it gives you a version of networking that you can do if you're an introvert. It's online as much as possible, and then you only go talk to people when they've invited you down and they're super interested in talking to you. That's the idea. So check that out. And we will be back in 2 weeks, I believe, from today. So we'll do another one of these, like a collaborative stream. And I will be back live on Friday in 2 days, talking about job search, talking about business. Check out Abby's channel. Check out my channel. And was there anything else, Abby? I'm trying to remember all the public service announcements. I gotta.
No. I think that if you're watching this from my channel and you're interested in looking into Bill's courses that he has available, they're great resources because they're self-paced and you can go back and you can re-access the information once you've gone through the course. So I've got his channel linked in my description box below as well. So please check out his channel if you haven't already. We kind of are in the same space. So I imagine that you're here because you have watched some of Bill's videos and some of my videos. So it's great resources all around.
Absolutely. Special thanks to Femi Williams, we got LK McLovin, Susan, Constantin, Tully Mars, everybody who participated. You guys are awesome. We wish you the best, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Bye, everyone.